The Legend of Aang has now officially dropped, emphasis on officially. Welcome to Movie Flame, I'm Morgan Ross, and today I am going to give an honest review of this new movie coming from a die-hard fan of the shows, the comics, and all of the lore. And on top of giving my review, I'll also break some things down, point out Easter eggs here and there, and just talk about anything else I noticed. And make sure you stay until the end of the video because that's where the juicy stuff is. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking and sharing, it will greatly help to grow and sustain the channel. And if you like what you see, hit that subscribe button, and you can also follow me on all of my other social media pages, all of which are linked down below, and all of which house similar content that I make here on this channel. Now, let's get into it. So I want to start this video by just going over Avatar Studios and Paramount in general, because we can't talk about this movie without talking about the leak. And I have a lot to say about this. This film was of course leaked on X or Twitter months ago before we even got a trailer. The person that leaked it was trying to punish Paramount, I guess, but in the process, it hurt the animators that worked so hard on this, for years mind you. Some of the animators made statements following the leak, and my heart breaks for them. It was clear that they didn't really care about Paramount taking the hit. All they cared about was that their work wasn't released on their terms. Some of them hadn't even seen the final film. This meant that they didn't get to experience the excitement of having a red carpet event where the film debuted. They didn't get to be the first people to see the final product, and they didn't get to see the fans' reactions in real time. I myself did not watch the leak. I wanted to wait until it was officially released, and I voiced my strong opinions about the asshole that leaked it, especially on X and Twitter. As somebody who went to film school, I can put myself in the animator's shoes, but for them, it was 10 times whatever I experienced with small film festivals. So yeah, leaking this was some pretty scumbag stuff. And honestly, I was pretty disappointed with how many people on X shared this and spread the leak. And don't get me wrong, Paramount is a shit company. They don't give a fuck about Avatar fans. I would have thought that they would release this in movie theaters for fans to see it on the big screen when the time came. But no, they released it on their crappy app. Not only was this disrespectful to the fans, the animators, and the creators of the franchise, but it was also a terrible business move if you ask me. Listen, I'm no expert in business. Obviously I run the Movie Flame production company, but that's barely anything compared to Paramount. But even I can look at this and question what the hell they were thinking. If they released it in theaters, those that had already seen the leak might want to experience it again on the big screen. But instead, by putting it on their app, it makes anyone who has seen the leak not even think to bother. They would just watch the same movie in the exact same way, so why would they pay for your app? And I will say that they did technically release it in theaters, but it got a limited theatrical release for a few days, giving almost nobody a chance to even experience it. And they didn't do this for the fans. Get this. They did this simply so the film would qualify for awards. Paramount is so selfish, and I wouldn't be surprised if this is the death of Avatar Studios, because the numbers are saying that they lost over $80 million with this leak, and they did nothing smart to fix that. In fact, they just kind of ignored the fact that it was leaked. But now that I've gotten that off my chest, let's talk about the actual movie. This film of course focuses on the adult team Avatar from the original series, that being Aang, Sokka, Katara, Toph, and Zuko. I think the characters were pretty accurately portrayed compared to the characters we all know so well from the show. Sokka was cracking the same kind of corny jokes that he did as a kid.
And there's the giant tornado that's going to kill us all.
Toph was the perfect amount of uncaring and sarcastic.
He smells good for an old guy.
Katara had the same morals and purity that we've come to love in her character. And Aang is the same Boy Scout that we knew, but now with a lot more responsibility, which does affect how he works and acts. And honestly, I think that was an accurate portrayal of who the young kid we once knew would become. Now, as for Zuko just didn't really feel like Zuko to me. Maybe it's because he didn't have a lot to say or do in this film. Most of what we see of him was just bending and action scenes. I think his placement in the credits says it all. He wasn't listed with the other actors part of Team Avatar, who were all back to back to back in the beginning, but he was actually behind that weird spirit, Calic from the Denied, the freaking guard that read the letter, the cabbage merchant, and D. Bradley Baker, the voice of Appa and Momo. The only real scene that shows his personality was the scene in the throne room, and even there, he didn't have a lot to say or do. Most of the scene was other people talking, And when he did talk, it just didn't sound like Zuko.
There's only one person who can send a message urgent enough to interrupt the Fire Lord's council.
And I think the obvious thing to point out is that Dante Bosco didn't reprise his role. Stephen Yeun took on the role instead, and let's be honest, he had a tall task filling Dante's shoes, because Dante might have one of the most unique voices in animation, and what he's most known for is Zuko.
That's rough, buddy.
But I feel like Yeun didn't even try to talk like Dante, who always had a very commanding voice.
My name is Zuko.
Yeun kinda did his own take on the character,
This could be the final step to rebuilding the world.
which you can't really do for a movie like this that's part of such a big fandom. Also, the fact that Yeun is the person that played him, he's no small actor. He's so well known for The Walking Dead, so the fact that he was so low on the credits is not a knock on him, but a knock on how little the character did in this movie. The voice actors were of course a big thing that people were talking about leading up to the film's release. None of the original actors reprised their roles, which I myself was pretty upset about. But, to be totally honest, I think the other voice actors did a really good job matching their predecessors. They all sounded very similar to the kids that played them 20 years before this.
My boomerang flew by his side while I carried away enemies with my trusty blade.
I saw you try to crush the Denied's airships.
Let's see if any of you tenderfoots can at least make me use my hands.
As the film progressed, I was pleasantly surprised that I stopped noticing the change in voice actors. That is, until Zuko spoke, because that would take me right out of it. But as I said, he didn't have many lines, so you can definitely tell that they leaned heavily on nostalgia for this movie, because there were a lot of Easter eggs. We saw the cabbage merchant, we saw Chan in the secret tunnel gang, there was the person foaming from the mouth, the ocean spirit, the lion turtles, who we'll talk more about in a bit. We saw Monkey Yatsu, Avatar Roku, Iroh, the Kyoshi warriors, and Suki, who I kinda wish had at least somewhat of a role in this film, because Suki didn't actually appear. The fact that I'm mentioning us seeing her as an Easter egg is pretty sad. She was absolutely part of Team Avatar, so I feel like she was kinda snubbed. But anyway, on multiple occasions, we saw the main characters young again, just like they were in the show. And we also saw Zuko and Katara old, which was the exact same design they had in The Legend of Korra. So that was kind of nostalgia bait for both the original series and the sequel series. There was also a Yu-Yan archer part of the plot, who were insanely accurate archers part of the Fire Nation, who we saw several times in the original series. And we got a reference to the opening of every episode, but this time, for each element, they showed each member of Team Avatar, first as they were in the show, and then as their adult selves. They also referenced specific episodes, like Katara teaching Aang waterbending from the episode The Cave of Two Lovers, or Toph teaching Aang earthbending from the episode Bitter Work, and Zuko and Aang facing Ren and Shaw from the episode The Firebending Masters. Then there was Sokka leading the Day of the Black Sun, and of course the finale where they faced the Fire Nation and Fire Lord Ozai. I felt kinda slighted that they didn't show Suki here though, because she was a massive part of this final battle, and I still think she was a huge part of Team Avatar, and it's disappointing that the film kind of ignored that. And the opening that showed the gang was almost exactly like the opening from the first Legend of Korra episode. Also, just a fun little thing that I noticed that I'm not sure if other people would. In the credits, they have a moment where the gang is taking a photo together, and this is a direct reference to the photo of Team Avatar when they were older, which was released over a decade ago at this point. So that was a really cool little Easter egg, which only diehard fans might notice. I was curious if they were going to reference the comics at all, because there are of course dozens of graphic novels and stories that took place after book 3, and I've covered so many of them on this channel. The movie didn't reference them too much though, but they did add small bits like Toph's Metalbending Academy, even featuring her original students, the Dark One, Hotun, and Penga, which I thought was pretty cool. There were also references to Legend of Korra at the end, like the beginning steps of Republic City, which was nowhere close to being built up as much as it was when Korra arrived, and also the formation of Air Temple Island, which is where Katara and Aang's son Tenzin, as well as their grandkids, would eventually live. Going over the animation, it was stunning. There were so many incredible sequences and moments that blew me away simply because of how they were animated. It's pretty crazy to watch this and then go back to the animation of the original series, and even to go back to The Legend of Korra. They've come a long way, and the animators absolutely cooked with the work they did on this movie. The animators also had a tall task to create the older versions of the original characters, and I think they did a great job. They stayed true to their original designs, but they also made it their own in certain aspects, and I don't think they could have hit it any further out of the park. Now, as for the actual story, I have major problems with it. For starters, the story really starts when Aang finds a new airbender stuck in an iceberg just like he was. This just completely undermines the show this is supposed to be a love letter to, as they're calling it. The show was called The Last Airbender. Aang is the last airbender, and that's how it should always be. That was the entire point and premise of the TV show.
I really am the last airbender.
And I think it's even worse that he was frozen in the exact same way as Aang, and then they make comments about how he one-upped Aang for being there longer.
You think this guy beat your record for longest frozen airbender?
The fact that this is what they ended up going with, out of the endless possibilities and directions they could have taken the plot, absolutely baffles me. I just think it hugely disrespects the series, and I think it makes Aang's purpose, growth, and importance to the world sort of be diminished. And this becomes even more ridiculous because not only does Taga appear, but he also creates an army of even more airbenders with the Denied, meaning there's not just one, there's not just two, but there are dozens of them.
Aang's not the last one anymore.
And this also undermines what happened later on in The Legend of Korra with a similar plotline, though this one was written a lot worse. As for Aang, I think they made him way too weak. In the beginning fight, he can't hold his own against non-benders, which is not a shot at those who can't bend, because that's obviously a big part of Sokka's arc in this film, which was very true to his character. But when you're the Avatar, what are you doing, dude? And then he can't even save Calic. He doesn't even try to bend, he just lets himself fall and he gets injured in the process. Why didn't he just airbend to break his fall? We've seen him do this so many times, and it should have been child's play to him at this point. Then later, he gets his ass beaten by Taga, even while in the goddamn Avatar state. And I know Taga had the staff, but he hadn't locked in its powers yet. He was still his normal self, just holding the staff. And Aang literally died in this movie, which I really didn't like for several reasons. For one, Aang dies in the exact same way that he did when Azula hit him at the end of Book 2. He was in the Avatar state. This is a huge deal because, as we know, if you die while in the Avatar state, all of the past lives are destroyed and the Avatar ceases to exist. Dying in the Avatar state is of course such a big deal, so I thought they would address this, but they didn't at all. They just rehashed the old plot where Katara healed him with special spirit water, but there was no mention of him even dying while in the Avatar state. And even if he didn't die in the Avatar state here, he would still have lasting consequences because he literally died and came back to life. Being in the Avatar state just makes this even worse. And him waking up was so underwhelming. There's no lasting damage and he just goes right back to fighting. This just doesn't add up. If I'm being honest, they should not have rehashed this iconic scene in the first place, especially in an hour-and-a-half movie where you have no time to develop it. And second, if you do, at least try to make it a big deal. The reason this was so impactful in the show was because it had lasting consequences for an entire season. For starters, Aang was unconscious for weeks when Azula hit him in the Avatar state, and even when he woke up, he was still incredibly weak and he had a massive scar on his back that was there for the rest of his life. But even more, in the show, he was emotionally scarred from what Azula did to him. He had PTSD, and because of this experience, he was not able to go into the Avatar state until the finale. So to have Aang just pop right back up after experiencing the exact same trauma, which probably would have brought up his old trauma, it just took me out of it. And I think this becomes even worse because the weight of him dying was set up earlier when Katara was talking to him about it.
And what if you got yourself killed? You're the Avatar.
So for him to actually die as the Avatar and then wake up just like that, it makes the impact of that line from Katara diminish. And I'll talk more about that in a second. But first, I want to talk about the fact that Toph, Zuko, and Sokka also died and were also revived by Katara. This not only takes away the weight of Aang dying in this movie, but also takes away the weight of him dying in the TV series. Because apparently, it's a lot easier to bring people back from the dead than we thought. It's not that special after all. And to have the others both die and come back to life off screen blows my mind. We saw them get hit, but we never saw them hit the ground. We never saw their body. If you're not gonna show that, at this point, you might as well just not have them die at all for all the good it did to the plot. They literally had one small line that told us this happened, and that was it.
I thought you were all dead.
We were, but Katara saved us.
Coming back to Aang's arc, I'll give them credit. I do think he grew as a character in this movie. I think a lot of things I like about his development go back to Katara though. On multiple occasions, she scolds him for being so reckless, reasoning that if he dies, the air nomads are gone forever. This is of course overshadowed by the fact that there is another airbender if he died though, and he's not actually the last airbender. But skipping over that, it's easy to understand Aang's longing for the staff, because for his entire life until this point, he's been the last piece of a culture lost forever.
I'm the last airbender. If I die, my culture dies with me.
To have the opportunity to bring that culture back would be alluring to anyone, even somebody as pure as Aang. This of course leads him to being more reckless than usual, even putting his friends in danger. And that's very unlike the Aang that we know, but I think it's justified based on the motives he has here. I also think that Katara being marked as Aang's weakness by Tago was such a good touch, because we know very well that she always has been his weakness. She was the reason he didn't complete his training for the Avatar state in the original series, fully knowing that the consequences could be dire. So for Taga to recognize that was alluring, and to see him actually try to kill Katara, that was a pretty wild moment that had me on the edge of my seat. And I think that was something earned not only because of the writing in this movie, but also because of how they played off the writing in the original show. The final battle in this movie was also something that really stuck with me. It's pretty much the opposite of his battle with Ozai, as he becomes corrupted and begins to kill Taka. Meanwhile, in the TV series, he did everything possible to ensure he didn't kill his opponent. And this could have been done in a lackluster and lazy way, which would kind of follow the pattern they had going in this film. But they actually gave a convincing and, dare I say, powerful way to make this tie together so nicely. What I'm referring to is the thing that snapped him out of it. Seeing his younger self, the younger him who did everything possible not to kill. This then perfectly segues into Aang doing what Avatar Sora could not do, which was giving up the power of the staff. So once again, just like his younger self, he was able to defy the odds of his past lives and make a sacrifice that many of them couldn't make. And the impact of this sacrifice is far greater perhaps than any sacrifice Aang had ever made. He had become obsessed with the idea of no longer being the last airbender, and all of that hope had to be sacrificed for the greater good. But stupidly, this is kind of ruined because he also had to make this sacrifice to ensure all of these new airbenders lost their powers too. If you ask me, this story definitely could have been told without bringing other airbenders into it. Having Aang feel the allure and hope of not being alone anymore would have been enough. They could have easily made Taga a normal non-bender who just knew a lot about the culture, sort of like Zahir from The Legend of Korra. In fact, if they placed Zahir in this role, it would have been absolutely perfect. Obviously, it wouldn't have worked with the timeline, but just stick with me. He's more knowledgeable about the air nomads than perhaps even Aang, and it would have made sense why he would want the staff, hoping he could get airbending himself. And even if he did, it would still allow Aang to be the last airbender. Obviously, the timeline would not allow that to happen, but you get my point. We didn't need another airbender to make this story work. And you can see how easy it would have been to write around that. I came up with that in like 40 seconds. Imagine what a whole team of writers could do over the course of months. This film heavily focused on Aang grappling with the guilt he had for running away when he was a kid.
It's all my fault. Ever since I ran away.
This was another thing that they rehashed from the series, and they even had him have the same dream about Gyatso in the air temple, then him running away and freezing himself in the iceberg. Literally the exact same dream he had as a kid. I think focusing on this was a big mistake, because this was something that he moved past years ago. Aang working through this was a massive part of book 1. It kind of undoes the huge leap his character took in the original series, and undoes the growth he had of accepting his mistakes and moving on to what he could control, the future.
The world needs you now. You give people hope.
Speaking of air nomad culture though, I was fascinated by the expanse of their lore. First of all, going to the other side of the earth was an interesting concept that I never really thought about, because when you look at the classic map, it is just on one side of the planet. I was also intrigued by the mention of why they were called air nomads,
allowing us to travel where we wish, giving us our name, the Air Nomads.
because nomad of course normally means people that travel from place to place, just as Taga said. But the thing that throws me off with this is that the air nomads had already colonized thousands of years before this, which we saw in the Legend of Korra with Avatar Wan's story, the first Avatar. They were already high up in the mountains, which makes it sort of weird that Avatar Sonam said that she was the one that sent them to these mountains.
I sent the remaining air nomads into the mountains.
I guess this could be a different colony of airbenders that made their way to the northern or southern air temples, which is what Avatar Wan would have seen. But once she said that, it definitely made me pause and question this, which I don't think is something you want your audience to do. I will say though, I did really like the idea of the islands being the lion turtles. At first I was like, how the hell did she give people bending? Only the lion turtles could do that. So when it was revealed that they were in fact the reason, I was pretty happy that they didn't screw that one up. It's also intriguing that the lion turtles taught one avatar to give someone bending, and one avatar how to take someone's bending. And the ending of the film where they find all of the bison, that was one of the most wholesome moments, and one of my favorite parts of the movie. Overall, this film had its moments, but I think it left me with more questions and complaints than anything else. The animation was fantastic, it looked amazing, and it had its moments of good writing. But I also think it relied too heavily on past story arcs, and they picked possibly the worst story arcs from the original series to try and redo. This movie comes nowhere close to the original show, and I don't even think it comes close to The Legend of Korra either. Now, was it a fun watch? At times, yes. But if you think too much about it, which most people watching will, given the fact that most people watching are diehard fans of the original show, I'd say it could disappoint you on more than one occasion. But let me know in the comments below what you thought of this film. I am very interested to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, I have a lot of other cool Avatar content on this channel, like this video where I go over what happened to every Avatar character after the original series ended, which focuses a lot on the comics. And over here is the video you'd like most on my channel according to your algorithm, so clearly you'd like that one. That's all I have for you guys today though. Thank you so much for watching.